Kaisel was an orphan loser whose family was wiped out by demons. However, when he discovers he belongs to a powerful hero bloodline, he seeks the holy sword for revenge, but gets distracted by baddies of different species who beg him to test his new Excalibur on them. One day, Kaisel was having a sparring match with friend Claus, and Kaisel was so trashy that Claus took him down within seconds and lectured, noting how he fights too straightforwardly like he has infinite plot armor and warning to be careful not to die like a level 1 bot. Kaisel tried to attack him once again, but Claus trolled him and took him down once again before telling the other knights in the area named Gran and Fleg to get back to work. Afterwards, Kaisel met up with his friend, a priestess named Frey, and they ate together while talking about the good old days at the orphanage where they used to hunt for insects, which Kaisel happened to love eating. Kaisel told her about how he felt useless for not being able to stop the incident in town earlier that day when the villagers almost tore apart a dreaded dark elf that showed up. But she told him to finish up his apprenticeship so that he could become a knight that could protect everyone just as he dreamed to be. In the castle, a chancellor named Bale informed the king, who was a bedridden old turd, that there were demons in the king's forest, causing the king to order him to send scouts to that area immediately. Some minutes later, a noble named Moraham interrupted a meeting of dukes in the castle concerning the demon issue and introduced a dark elf named Rahit as his soldier. The nobles started chewing him out for bringing a dark elf into the castle since humans hated their kind, so he gaslighted them into accepting Rahit by reminding them that there were no laws forbidding dark elves from entering the castle. When they asked why he brought Rahit there, he advertised Rahit and his overpowered mercenary group named Black Edge as the perfect set of scouts to handle their demon situation in the forest. Bale asked Rahit what he'd want in return for their help, and the elven John Wick replied that all he needed was the payment. Once again, Moraham asked the chancellor to use the Black Edge, but since the other nobles disagreed as the hate ran too deep, he ended up taking the loss and left the room. Later that evening, Kaisel was dining with his 3 knight buddies, and they all talked cheerfully until Claus informed Kaisel that he was heading out for a new mission, which meant that their training would have to be halted for a while. He told Kaisel that his squad, including Gran and Fleg, were sent out to investigate the demon sightings in the forest, and this made Kaisel worried, so he assured him that they'd do their duties as knights and be back in one piece. Much later, the elves of Black Edge were having a meeting at a secret spot in town, and one of them named Tam eagerly asked when they were going to destroy all the humans. This got the other elves riled up and excited until a female elf among them named Ripine told them all to shut up. Rahit said they'd only taken the first step towards their goal, and together they plotted to one day take over the kingdom of Orvelia as revenge for all the oppression they'd shown to the dark elves over the years. The following day during the mission, Claus and his team were brutally ambushed by a bunch of skeleton demons who wasted no time before unaliving a bunch of them, including Fleg. Claus told Gran to report their situation to the castle while he fought off the monsters, and when Kaisel heard that only one knight came back, he immediately rushed to the gate where he saw an injured Gran getting piggybacked to that castle. Gran told Bale and the other dukes about the horrifying situation his squad were in, and Moraham seized the opportunity to once again pitch the Black Edge to fight in place of their worthless soldiers. Meanwhile, Kaisel met up with Frey and told her that he had to go into the forest in order to save Claus. She tried to talk him out of it, but he passionately claimed that he'd never let anyone he cared about die again, and she demanded to accompany him on this venture since her priestess skills would benefit him in battle. Kaisel and Frey patrolled the forest and eventually got to a point where they saw the bloodied bodies of the knights from Claus's squad, and Kaisel instantly got depressed when he saw the body of his dear friend Fleg among them. As Frey went forward to say a prayer for these fallen soldiers, Kaisel started to search for Claus, and he was stunned when he found Claus's shield on the floor. They noticed there was a severed head underneath the shield, and Kaisel lifted up the shield with fear in his eyes because he thought his mentor went out like a demon slayer villain. However, they were relieved to find out that it wasn't Claus, and Kaisel immediately rushed forward to look for Claus until an arrow came flying towards them at high speed. Kaisel managed to get Frey out of the way in time, and when they looked up, they saw a skeleton demon aura farming right above them. Just then, a whole pack of skeleton demons charged at them, causing Kaisel to tell Frey to run away while he charged at them. Kaisel had an intense clash with the skeleton demons while a mysterious lady named Maria watched from a nearby tree, and he managed to block off all their long-range attacks using his sword before pushing 3 of them back at once with massive swing. He tried to make a run for it with Frey, but Maria appeared in front of him and said she wanted to play with him before releasing a wave of dark aura that pushed him into a tree. When Frey went to check on him, the skeleton demons fired some more arrows at them, which she managed to block by creating a magic barrier. When the skeleton demons charged at her, Rahit took them all out with a single swing of his blade, and 2 other Black Edge elves arrived at the scene. The 2 Black Edge elves folded the skeleton demons within seconds, and Rahit engaged in a one-on-one tango against Maria. The 2 of them dodged each other's powerful attacks, and Kaisel's jaws dropped to the floor when he saw how powerful they were. When they overheard some other Black Edge elves arriving at the scene, Maria told Kaisel that she'd play with him again next time and disappeared into a dark mist. Just then, Tam and Rapine arrived at the scene, and Kaisel introduced himself to them before thanking them for saving his life. Rahit said they didn't save him because they were only hired mercenaries who were put on a mission to defeat the demons in the forest. One of them asked what Kaisel was doing there, and Kaisel revealed that he was there to check if his friend was safe, causing him to laugh at him because it was already a fact that at that point that all of the knights in the area were toast. However, Kaisel said he believed there were survivors, and when a skeleton demon tried to attack them after respawning, the elf immediately destroyed it. After the Black Edge elves left, Frey healed an injury Kaisel had on his cheek, and he expressed how useless he felt for not being able to do anything against the demons despite having dreams of becoming the next Kirito. Just then, 2 adventurers walked by, including a quirky lowly dressed in Temu Harry Potter cosplay who introduced herself as a sorceress named Cleo, and a guy named Roy who introduced himself as her bodyguard. When Frey asked what they were doing there, Cleo replied that they were looking for the 2 of them specifically so they could take them to a special place. Cleo took them to a cliff where they revealed that the one who sent for them was someone named Dominix, who was the sorcerer in charge of the Tower of the Sage. When Cleo asked if they knew each other, Frey told her about how Dominix used to visit their orphanage, and when she asked why he was looking for them, Roy said Dominix would fill them in when they met him. Cleo told them they were all going to the Tower of the Sage, which stunned Frey because she knew only the Chosen were allowed to enter the tower. However, Cleo revealed that she was a Chosen One and activated a large magic circle which transported them to the gates of a magical city. As they walked towards the tower, Cleo told them that most of the people in town were apprentices to the Great Sage, and also revealed that Dominix slowed down his aging using his magic power. When they arrived at the tower, Dominix exchanged some pleasantries with Kaisel and Frey, and Cleo stunned them by revealing that he was actually the Great Sage and not just some sorcerer who worked for him. Dominix said he kept his identity hidden because he didn't want to cause any problems, and when Kaisel asked him why he brought them there, he said there was someone he wanted them to meet. He took them to a room where they saw Claus resting on a bed, and Dominix informed them that he was holding on to life despite being heavily injured during battle, causing them to feel relieved. Roy said they received word of the demonic activities in the forest, but even with their intervention, Claus was the only survivor. When Frey asked if Dominix knew they were coming, he said yes and revealed that he'd been watching them from the tower. Just then, Claus woke up, and after he told Kaisel about how the demons bodied his team, Kaisel told him about the mercenaries and also that he encountered Maria, who ran off during their fight. When Claus said he didn't encounter Maria, Kaisel and Frey realized that she wasn't in cahoots with the skeleton demons, and they started pondering over who she could be until Dominix suggested they leave Claus to rest for the meantime. Later that night, Cleo showed Frey to her room and told her about how life at the tower could be boring sometimes, and the 2 of them gleefully stared at the night sky until Cleo left the room. Meanwhile, Kaisel was doing a bit of stargazing of his own, and when Frey came by, he told her about a demon invasion of their village in the past where his mother died protecting him, and expressed how he didn't want to lose anyone again. He got up from the ground where he was sitting and declared that he would get stronger no matter what. Meanwhile, in the castle, Rahit informed the dukes that he and his gang had carried out their task of slaying the demons, and Moraham followed up by giving a triumphant speech about how they needed to work more with the elves just like the legendary King Kyle did in order to defeat the Demon Lord. Afterwards, Moraham and Rahit had their own private meeting where Moraham plotted to make the other dukes answer to him, and Rahit agreed to help him with his dreams in order to further his own plans. The next day, Claus said he wanted to head back to Orvelia as soon as possible, and Kaisel attempted to stop him until he and Frey were summoned by Dominix, who informed them that Kaisel was the son of the great King Kyle who fought the Dark Lord Ogmund 100 years ago, and that he was destined to inherit the Holy Sword Ea. Kaisel asked how it was possible for him to be the son of someone who was alive 100 years ago, and Dominix said he'd explain everything that happened while Kyle was alive. Elsewhere, Tam brought some food for his Black Edge brethren, and he told them that the shopkeepers were initially hesitant to give him the food because of his elven looks, but they folded instantly when he said he worked for Lord Moraham. He delivered the loaves of bread to them, and when Rapine tried out her bread, she initially lit up because of how delicious it was, but then decided to play the Tsundir role by aiming that Orvelia foods were salty. Tam said he disagreed and then brought up the fact that dark elves used to be allowed to roam around Orvelia during King Kyle's rule, and one of his comrades said it was because of someone named Ilya that dark elves were now treated like COVID-19 patients. Back at the tower, Dominic's narrated King Kyle's story, starting from the time when he was still a prince. Back then, Kyle defeated Ilya in a sparring match and started getting friendly with each other until Dominic's interrupted to acknowledge how much they've improved. During their training break, they all snacked on sandwiches and Ilya started chewing Kyle out for sneaking into town despite being royalty. Kyle told her that he wanted to see how the citizens lived with his own eyes because he couldn't see them from the castle. He said he wanted to be a king that could protect his people and make them happy, and Ilya said he'd indeed make a great king before offering to assist him during his reign with her knowledge of technomagic. Sometime later, Kyle asked Dominic's why the people in the city were living in poverty despite the fact that the nation had been at peace for several years, and Dominic's replied that it was because the war with the neighboring nations left many families without working-age members, which eventually caused their poverty. Kyle studied and trained hard in order to fulfill his dream of becoming a great king, and he eventually got together with a woman who shared his dream named Arlette. In the present, Kaysel was stunned when Dominic's told him that Arlette was his mother, and when Frey asked him how Kaysel's mom was alive 100 years ago, he said he'd explain it later. Dominic's continued his story as he narrated how Kyle and Arlette loved happily until the nobles found out about their relationship and forced them to separate. He explained that because Kyle was the successor to the king, Arlette was an obstacle to their plans for a political marriage, and he added that this was only the start of Kyle's tragedies because it didn't take long before demons appeared in the nation. The demons ravaged towns and villages, and Kyle led his army into defeating the demons over and over again until the day when his father, King Median, passed away, allowing him to officially become king of Orvelia. On the day of his coronation, Kyle boldly declared that he'd defeat the demons in the nation and protect the people, which made everyone in the room pumped, especially Ilya, who was now determined to fulfill her promise to him. Afterwards, King Kyle met up with Lorraine, the leader of the elves, and Iatola, the leader of the orcs, to form an alliance because he wanted to defeat the demons as a combined force. Everyone believed in Kyle's plan, but unfortunately, the demons had a massive advantage in numbers and Kyle was soon injured in battle. He found Arlette inside a shelter, and that was when she informed him that she was carrying his child, which was none other than Kaysel. Kyle decided that his son would be named Kaysel, and also claimed that he wanted to protect the world from his child who would soon arrive. In response to his wish, Lua, the goddess of light, appeared and gave Kyle the holy sword Ea to enable him save the world from the Dark Lord Angmund. Kyle received this sword and informed the leaders of the different races of a proclamation which Lua made, which says that when a red ring covers the moon, the Dark Lord would appear and threaten the world. However, he said that the Dark Lord could be defeated with the holy sword Ea, and once again asked them to aid him, causing them to pledge their allegiance to him once again. Meanwhile, Ilya devoted herself to her study of technomagic, and in the present, Dominic's told Frey and Kyle that Ilya attempted to create another holy sword which the people of Orvelia branded as blasphemy against Lua. When Frey asked why she attempted to create it, Dominic said she was attempting to help Kyle like she promised. When the day of reckoning came, a sorcerer serving the Republic of Grey named Malduk used a forbidden spell to tear open a dimensional fissure, which brought the Dark Lord Angmund to the world. Kyle and his gang set out to defeat the Dark Lord, and Ilya, who had recently completed her research, chased after Kyle but got unalived by demons on the way. With the help of his companions, Kyle engaged in a heated battle against Angmund, but after the battle, both Kyle and Angmund disappeared, leaving only the holy sword at the battlefield. After that day, peace returned to the world as demonic activities reduced throughout the land, but Malduk escaped and nobody knew where King Kyle was. King Kyle's companions ended up sealing away the holy sword Ea and decided to hold each key to break that seal to ensure that it remained unbroken until the day the Dark Lord returned. At the same time, Ilya was put on trial after her death and found guilty of defiling Lua in an attempt to create a false holy sword, which led to the persecution of dark elves in Orvelia. In the Black Edge hideout, Tam expressed his desire to go back in time to fix everything for the elves, thinking he was the Flash or something, and Rahit said the only timing that mattered was that they settle their grievances with Orvelia for all the elven blood they shed. Back in the tower, Kaysel asked Dominic's to tell him about his mother, and Dominic's told him that back then, they feared that Malduk would one day return to summon the Dark Lord again 100 years later, so they put Arlette to sleep for a century, allowing her to give birth to the next holy sword wielder in Kaysel. However, she ended up getting unalived when demons attacked their village, and it was Dominic's who sent Kaysel to the orphanage where he grew up. Dominic revealed that the nocturnal sun was on the verge of intersecting with the moon again, meaning that the Dark Lord would soon return, and pointed out that the recent increase in demon sightings was because of this upcoming event. Out of pure desire for power, Kaesel asked Dominix how he could get the Holy Sword, and Dominix explained that he'd first had to break the seal by meeting Lorraine, the Grand Sage of the Forest of Elidora. He told Cleo and Roy to accompany them on this mission, and Cleo was extremely excited because she was finally getting to leave the tower. Kaesel and the gang moved to the entrance, and they were teleported by Cleo to a forest where Maria was lurking. Kaesel and the team soon arrived at Elidora, and Cleo was disappointed about the fact that it was a forest because she thought they'd be going to Disneyland instead. She asked Kaesel how he felt about the fact that he was the son of the legendary King Kyle, and before he could even give a solid answer, she started trolling him based on the fact that he was a weaker hero than Newman Ryder. Frey said she believed they were being guided by the goddess of light Lua, and just then, Roy managed to save Cleo from an arrow which flew directly towards her. A horde of skeleton demons appeared in the area, and Roy immediately charged at them. Frey attempted to join him, but Cleo said there was no need, and Roy pulled off moves right out of Sung Jin Woo's playbook, which allowed him to destroy all the demons within seconds. Before he could take a victory lap, a second group of demons appeared in front of him, and they all prepared to take him out with their bows before they were sniped from behind by a bow-wielding elf named Celine. When they approached her, Celine told them that she'd been waiting for them and didn't offer them a chance to have a friendly chat with her before nonchalantly asking them to follow her to meet Lorraine. She led them through the forest of Elidora, and as they marveled at the beautiful sights, they encountered a giant tree monster called a Treant which walked past them. Kaesel asked Celine who she was, but instead of introducing herself, she rudely told him to refer to her master as Master Lorraine and not just Lorraine. When Cleo repeated the question, she introduced herself to them and said she was sent by Lorraine to bring Kaesel to her. As they moved along, a little Treant started spying on them from behind a tree, and they got to a point where Roy and Cleo noticed that they were being watched. They started hearing some murmurings which were suggesting they leave the forest, and the words of these mysterious beings also revealed that Celine was a princess. Celine confirmed that she was a princess, and the voices eventually got so intense that Cleo started calling the creatures out to have a fight with them. Celine explained that the forest creatures were acting grumpy because the forest was sacred to them, and they didn't like the idea of welcoming humans into their home. Cleo argued that it wasn't nice, but Kaesel stopped her mid-rant by claiming that they were truly outsiders there, and that they needed to get to Lorraine quickly in order not to escalate things. As they continued their journey, the little Treant followed them from behind, and they got to a point where Celine suddenly vanished. The path ahead was split into two. One path was clear, and the other was blocked by branches. As the heroes followed the clear path, the other one magically opened up, and the four of them appeared on a cliff which was outside the forest. The path behind them suddenly closed up, and Cleo revealed that the forest of Elidora was also known as the Forest of the Lost because elves and Treants played tricks on travelers to make them lose their way. Meanwhile, Celine suddenly noticed that Kaesel and the gang weren't behind them, so she commanded the creatures in the forest to reopen their path. When they debated, she used a lighter tone to explain that they had to let them into the forest because Lorraine wished for it. At the same time, Kaesel and the gang were trying to figure out a way back into the forest when the little Treant named Necha showed up and offered to guide them back into the forest. Cleo expressed her lack of trust for him, but Kaesel said couldn't afford to just stand there, and they followed Necha back into the forest where they reunited with Celine. Celine started petting Necha, and when Cleo heard her calling his name, she suggested that Chibai would be a much better name for him. Celine thanked Necha for guiding them and tried to warn him against hanging around humans, but he insisted on tagging along with them. They got to a part of the forest where they decided to camp out for the night, and while Cleo argued with Celine over which mushrooms were poisonous or not, Kaesel randomly picked a mushroom and ate it, leaving Celine stunned by how trustful he was towards her kind. Later that night, Kaesel had a cute sparring match with Necha while everyone watched, and after a few clashes of their wooden branches, Kaesel said he needed some rest, so Cleo took over as Necha's playmate. Celine told Kaesel that Necha had grown fond of him because he saw something in him, and when she asked who he was, Kaesel explained that he was a weak man desperately trying to protect his loved ones, and said that he needed to meet Lorraine to gain the power he needed to do so. When Celine left to take a look around, the gang were having a discussion around the campfire, and Kaesel said he needed the power in order to protect everyone, causing Cleo to belittle him once again by bringing up how ordinary he looked despite being the heir of a sword with more power than every Bankai in Bleach. They also discussed the possibility of Malduk returning, and Cleo brought up the fact that Angmund had only appeared once in history, which was during Kyle's era. She said the reason this was so was because Kyle and his companions managed to defeat the Dark Lord before he came into their world, and they decided that the best course of action would be for Kaisel to get the Holy Sword before Angmund returns. Meanwhile, Celine was in a secluded part of the forest thinking about how Kaisel was different from every other human she'd encountered when all of a sudden, a loud bang reverberated through the entire forest. Kaisel and company rushed to the source of the noise, and there they saw a possessed treant causing a ruckus. Celine was surprised because the treants were normally peaceful creatures, and she tried to guide them to safety, but they suddenly encountered a demon who took down the angry treant. In an attempt to avenge his fallen comrade, Necha charged at the demon, but the demon grabbed him with its tentacles and started crushing him. Kaisel rushed in to save him, but got pushed into a nearby tree, and when he tried to make a second attempt, Celine went into green arrow mode as she fired some arrows at the demon while telling Kaisel and his gang to escape. However, Kaisel said he couldn't leave Necha behind, and everyone charged at the monster at once, causing it to get so enraged that it tried to separate Frey's head from her shoulders. Kaisel blocked the attack, but got grabbed by the demon instead, and as drew him closer to its mouth. Necha saved him by stabbing the demon with its wooden sword, forcing it to release him. In retaliation, the demon absolutely annihilated Necha, and while everyone stared in shock, Kaisel went into berserk mode and unleashed a fluffy of brutal slashes on the demon until Frey stopped him. When Frey looked back, she saw Lorraine watching them with a concerned expression on her face. Some minutes later, Kaisel washed his face after spilling 2 buckets of tears, and Lorraine thanked him and his gang for saving the forest of Elidora. However, Kaisel was still torn up over the fact that he couldn't protect Necha, so Lorraine comforted him by telling him that Necha was very happy to have spent some time with him. She also commended Celine for doing a great job in bringing them there and asked Kaisel what the reason for his coming was. Kaisel told her that he came with the intention of asking her to unseal the Holy Sword Ea, and Celine was surprised when she realized that he was the sword's successor. However, Lorraine told Kaisel that she couldn't unseal the sword at that very moment, and as Cleo ranted, she went on to reveal that the Holy Sword's power would begin to flow into him immediately she undoes the seal. She then asked if he was worthy of the power, and he replied that he needed that power. So she reminded him that the power of the Holy Sword was so strong that it would even body the Dark Lord, adding that it could destroy him completely if not wielded correctly. Kaisel said he didn't care what happened to him because he wanted power to protect those dear to him, and she replied that she understood how he felt before saying that they'd continue their talk the next day. A while later, Celine took them to Lorraine's residence and told them to rest there, but Frey stopped her before she could leave and told her that she wanted to bury Necha in his favorite spot. Celine took them to a certain tree where he used to play all the time, and just when they were about to bury him, Lorraine made a surprise appearance and offered to help them with the burial. Using her staff, she dug a hole in the ground and Celine put Necha's remains inside of it while everyone said kind words about him. Afterwards, Lorraine told Celine she wanted to have a private conversation with her, and they went to a fancy location in the forest where Lorraine asked the Egghead Princess what she thought of Kaisel. Celine acted confused by her question, so Lorraine made things clearer by asking if she thought he was worthy of earning the power of the Holy Sword Ea. Celine said she didn't know and asked Lorraine why she was asking her. Lorraine replied that she wanted her opinion since Celine was the one who got to spend time with him and see his personality directly. Celine briefly remembered everything Kaiser did during their journey together, but still replied that she wasn't sure, so Lorraine told her to put some thought into it. After their conversation, Celine walked to a separate part of the forest, where she wondered if Kaisel had what King Kyle had that drew other people to follow him. She felt that a man who let himself get lost in anger would surely be headed towards demise, and her brainstorming was interrupted when she saw Kaisel hanging around Necha's grave. Kaisel apologized to Necha for not being able to protect him, even though he defeated the demon. He then expressed his regret over the fact that he got consumed by rage while fighting the demon and claimed that it wasn't the power he needed. Suddenly, a little plant sprouted from Necha's grave and Celine came by to inform him that treants usually received new life after dying in the form of sprouts like that one. However, she was stunned by how quickly Necha's sprout came out, and she presumed that it was because Necha was trying to cheer them up, causing Kaisel to thank him before swearing to get stronger once again. Some hours later, they met up with Lorraine and the others, and when Lorraine asked Celine if she'd reached a conclusion about Kaisel, she confirmed that she had. Celine brought up how Kaisel and his crew rushed to help the forest of Elidora the moment they saw a demon without regard to their own safety, which was something they didn't believe humans were capable of. Lorraine asked why she didn't give her the answer that night, and Celine said it was because she was unsure of Kaisel given the fact that he went berserk on the demon. She initially feared that if a human with that much rage got his hands on the power, He could use it against the forest, but Kaysel proved to be different because he acknowledged that the power he felt in that moment wasn't real power. She concluded her speech by saying that both she and Necha felt that Kaysel was worthy of wielding the Holy Sword's power, and when he thanked her, she got hit with a wave of his virgin riz, causing her to blush while struggling to muster up a reply. Lorien asked to confirm if Kaysel was ready for the power, and when he confirmed that he was, the determined look on his face reminded her of Kyle. She told Selene about how she once fought alongside Kyle to defend the world from the Dark Lord without any racial conflicts, and then told Kaysel that she'd undo the seal. Using magic, she broke through the seal, causing some of the Holy Sword's power to flow into Kaysel. Afterwards, Kaysel said he didn't feel more powerful, so she assured him that he'd eventually feel the power before revealing that there were 2 more locks on the seal, which were being held by Iatola, the leader of the orcs in the Ogria Mountain and Pavel, who was in the Windland Snow Mountain. Suddenly, they got an alert about some demons invading the area, and when they went out to face this demon, they were surprised to see that it was the exact same demon that unalived Necha. Frey asked how it was possible, so Cleo informed her that some demons could love even after their heads had been cut off. Selene attempted to pull off some Hawkeye moves on the demon, but Lorraine stopped her and asked her to watch as Kaysel charged at it. Using a single slash, Kaysel destroyed the majority of the demon's tentacles and stabbed it right in the heart. Afterwards, he thanked Lorraine for her help, and Selene told Kaysel that she trusted him and his friends. On their way to Orja Mountain, Roy suggested they stop at the nearby towns and villages to gather some information and also refuel. Maria made a shocking appearance, and Cleo immediately felt her overwhelming magic power as she aura farmed in front of them. She fired a wave of dark magic at them, and Kaysel managed to tank the attack while shielding his friends as well. When he asked what she wanted, she got up close to him and said she wanted to play with him. When she attempted to cleave his head off, he pushed her back with his sword, and she instantly realized that the power she felt from him was the power of the Holy Sword. She pushed him to the side and said that Kyle was the only one who was meant to wield that power. However, the resident loudmouth Cleo revealed to her that Kaysel was Kyle's son, and she revealed that the Holy Sword's power was Luna's curse before asking if he intended to become Lua's puppet as well. Once again, she disappeared into a black mist, leaving everyone baffled. As Kaysel and the gang continued their journey to the Ogria Mountain, they passed through a certain bridge, and Cleo was excited about visiting the next town because it had so many great foods and locations, which made it a dream tourist spot for her. When they got into town, Cleo wasted no time before spending all of Frey's money on some street grub. After stuffing their faces, Cleo suggested they visit some more fun spots, but they declined. She tried to gaslight them using a heroic story about how the town survived a war 30 years ago using the power of friendship, and Roy suggested they find an inn so they could rest before continuing their trip. They ended up going along with Cleo's sightseeing wishes, and at the end of it, they realized that they had no cash left, so Cleo suggested they find a way to make some money in town. She later got them a job at an inn where they were paid and given a free room in exchange for serving customers there, so all of them, with the exception of Kaysel, spent the day doing bar work. That evening, Kaysel was chopping up some wood, and he remembered Maria's parting words to him, causing him to wonder if the Holy Sword's power was truly a curse. Meanwhile, Cleo couldn't stop herself from showing off her magic to the surrounding maids, and the magical dweeb girl ended up starting a fire at the bar. After getting kicked out of the bar, the crew were at a spot in town where Cleo was sulking, and Roy explained to Kaysel and Frey that Cleo was a wild child because she had no experience with the outside world. He also told them about a time she blew up a building, which made Dominic's advise her to put her potential to good use. Frey then joined Cleo where she was resting, and Cleo apologized for the mess she caused before admitting that she wished for an older sister like Frey. Frey was baffled by her words, so Cleo explained that her mother died when she was little, and although she didn't remember her mother's face, she remembered how her mother twisted the iconic quote from Spider-Man by telling her that great power comes with great sadness. She said she often wondered what it meant and wished she could ask her mom directly, and Frey said she could understand what her mom meant if she practiced magic more, since she believed that Cleo and her mom were still connected. The next morning, Kaysel and Frey woke up but couldn't find Roy, but they found a note he left behind which said he'd left to make some money for them. When Frey brought up how Cleo was missing as well, the goofy pink-haired devil they spoke of showed up and said she'd found work for them in a restaurant on the outskirts of town, but she eventually noticed that Roy was missing. While Roy was out peddling some of his fancy equipment, Kaysel and Frey followed Cleo to the outskirts restaurant, which ended up not looking like the Ice Guy version of McDonald's they were expecting. There they met a scary-looking old hag named Madame Wolf, who instantly put them through tons of harsh work. and after seeing Cleo's magical ability, she put her through 1,000 times more work than the others. Afterwards, Cleo got into a rap battle with the old hag, and when they were done, Madame Wolf put her through some more nightmarish work while mocking her in the process. After a hard day of work, Madame Wolf treated them to a meal which they confessed was far better than all the road nonsense they'd been eating. She then told them that she hadn't cooked in a long time because people rarely showed up to her restaurant. And when Kaisel suggested she do some advert for her restaurant, she said she didn't mind the low turnout because she cooked slowly using charcoal fire. Cleo was about to suggest making use of her flame magic, but she remembered what happened in the last restaurant she attempted that in, and this made her hesitate. Madame Wolf said she should absolutely desist from using flame magic in that area, and when they asked why, she explained that the area, which used to be a big town, was razed down by a war which involved a lot of flames and demons that caused her loved ones to die. She also revealed that her restaurant was all that remained in that area and showed them a bunch of gravestones lined up outside, which were the former townsfolk, while telling them that she absolutely didn't want flame magic to be used in that area ever again. Cleo argued that magic is used for saving people and not hurting others, but Madame Wolf told her about a mage who tried protecting her people during the war, but it led to a great tragedy, and Cleo was stunned when she saw the old hag shed a tear during her story. A while later, Cleo looked at the graves and remembered her mother's words, which made her wonder if that was the great sadness she was referring to. Just then, a horde of demons showed up, and Cleo noticed that some demons were already closed to the restaurant. Kaisel told Frey to take care of Madame Wolf and knocked out a demon knight as he ran out to face the rest of the demons. Frey told Madame Wolf to escape through the back door while she covered the front, and as Madame Wolf ran off, Kaisel slashed up a bunch of demons. He was soon joined by Cleo, who dropped a couple of the demons with her staff. Eventually, the numbers game caught up to them, and Madame Wolf had to save Cleo by throwing a stone at a demon, which inadvertently revealed her hiding spot in the process and put her in immediate danger. As the demon approached Madame Wolf, Cleo tried to save her, but couldn't use her magic after remembering Wolf's tragic words. Seeing this, Madame Wolf realized that she'd messed up, and when the demons overpowered Cleo, Madame Wolf yelled that she should use her magic, adding that the present is more important than the past. The demons tried attacking her again, but Frey protected her with a shield before Cleo used a majestic flames spell that created a rain of fireballs that turned the demons into some premium pork roast. Afterwards, she apologized to the madam, but the Madame Wolf said it was okay since she was putting her life on the line for her friends, and the two hotheads embraced each other. Roy soon arrived at their location, so Cleo chewed him out for being late while telling him about the demons they just fought. He showed her the pile of cash he made while they were playing around Granny, and before Cleo could get her hands on it, Frey grabbed their cash while offering to be the group's new treasurer. The next day, the crew left Madame Wolf's restaurant, and as they moved along, Cleo realized that she now had clarity on what it meant to be a true mage. Much later, the Black Edge elves were flexing their battle skills on some poor demons, and Ripine put the fight to an end as she ripped the last set of demons in the area apart. After the battle, Rahit reported to Moraham that the mission was a success, and Moraham told him that Baal wants to see him before revealing that the kingdom was planning to launch a formal operation to hunt demons, which would give Rahit a chance to showcase his awesome skills once again. Later that evening, Rahit eavesdropped as an astrologist named Ophelia told Baal and the Princess Scarlet that the day of Lee, the goddess of darkness, was approaching, which involved the nocturnal sun crossing with the moon to bring terror on the world. She revealed that the stars whispered to her that the Dark Lord Angmund would show up during this terror, and Baal feared that the kingdom would be cooked since Kyle wasn't around and their king was practically a vegetable. But Scarlet assured him that the knights would defend the kingdom. Scarlet said she'd never let the demon lord trample over Orvelia before telling Ophelia to keep reading the stars, and as she made her way, Rahit came out to meet them. Baal introduced Scarlet as the princess as well as the commander of knights, and after Scarlet complimented his squad for all their hard work during the demon invasions, she proposed that Black Edge join the knights. Rahit humbly agreed to her offer, so she asked him to join the knights for a general meeting the next morning as she left. When Rahit informed the Black Edge elves that they'd be joining the knights, Tam was worried that it would affect their mission, so a sleazy elf in the group explained that it would make it easier for them to infiltrate and take over the kingdom. Rahit then announced that they'd have to be more alert in order to stay away from trouble, and when an elf asked about the princess, Rahit said she seemed like she'd be a tough opponent. The next day, Scarlet briefed the knights about Ophelia's predictions, and when Rahit walked into the room, she officially announced to them that he and his squad would be joining the knights. One of the knights named Zero argued the issue by bringing up Ilia's matter, but Scarlet said it had nothing to do with Black Edge and asked if anyone else disagreed with the decision. Everyone accepted the decision, and when she asked Zero if he was on board, he proceeded to act like a complete scumbag as he mocked Rahit by suggesting he did some rat hunting while giving him a luxurious item as down payment. However, Rahit returned his expensive nonsense and told him that money wouldn't save him if demons broke into the town. Scarlet then declared that the Black Edge were their friends as of that day and forbade anyone from disrespecting them. She then resumed the meeting, and when she asked a knight named Demia for some new info, Demia said she got word of numerous demon sightings in the forest of Alidora. Scarlet then asked for Rahit's opinion, so he said they could send some scouts to investigate that area before suggesting that they reorganize the defending knights to be able to protect more people, and Scarlet liked Rahit's ideas. Zero was so disgusted by the idea of dark elves joining the knights that he went to whine to his father, who was one of the nobles. However, things didn't go his way because the nobles told him that they didn't have a choice since Black Edge was their best option to defend Orvelia, and his father agreed as well. The next day, Tam went into the city and was surprised to see that everyone in town was suddenly giving him the Justin Bieber treatment because of Black Edge's help in slaying demons, and he decided to take the WZ, but he eventually got to an alley where some armed humans blocked his path. He resisted the urge to take them down when he remembered Rahit's orders, and he ran away instead. Soon he got cornered and thugs injured him before kicking him to the ground. Before they could finish him off, his Black Edge comrade saved him and scared them off. The comrade noticed that he had a fever, and a nice human girl Tam met at a bread shop offered to call a doctor, but Tam's comrade declined, saying they didn't want to cause trouble before carrying Tam away. When they got to the Black Edge hideout, Rahit commended Tam for holding back, and when Tam made fun of the humans that attacked him, Rahit realized that they were sent by Zero. Later that evening, Rahit told Moraham about the incident, and Moraham explained that Zero was a candidate for Princess Scarlet's betrothal, which made him always desperate to earn her favor. Moraham speculated that Zero was jealous of Rahit, and when Rahit pointed out that Zero succeeding with his plans of driving Black Edge out would be bad for their plans, Moraham said he'd alert the nobles while Rahit looked for evidence. The next day, Rahit told Scarlet about the incident, and she apologized before Zero dropped by to troll him. When Rahit returned to the Black Edge base that evening, Ripine showed him the blade of one of Tam's attackers, and he instantly recognized the crest on the blade as Zero's, so he rushed out. Some hours later, Rahit, accompanied by Ripine, intercepted Zero's moving wagon and threatened him until he eventually confessed. Rahit then unsheathed his sword, but before he could split that piece of trash into two smelly pieces, Zero's father jumped out and begged for him to spare his son, so Rahit warned them to stay away from his friends. When they got back to their base, Tam thanked Rahit for doing Batman work on his behalf, and Rahit assured him that those bozos won't bother them anymore. Sometime later, Rahit and Ripine stared at the stars, and Ripine remembered how she was bawling her eyes out after some Orvelians unalived their mom. Back then, Rahit promised that he'd get revenge for their mom, and back in real time, Ripine said they'd come far, which made Rahit look at a mysterious item as he agreed. Some days later, Cleo and the rest of the gang were walking through a forest while goofing off as usual when a weird girl popped out from one of the bushes and stared at them before running away. Eventually, they made it to a village nearby where they met a guy named Hendel, who introduced himself as the mayor of the village before telling them that his building used to be a community hall but was now a shelter. Kaisel asked what happened, so he explained that a nearby town was attacked by demons, which made the citizens there escape into their village. Frey saw a lady get injured while trying to lift a log, so she healed her, and Hendel was pleased upon realizing that she was a priestess. He told them that the villagers were working together to build new houses, but pointed out that they lacked manpower, so Frey offered to help along with the team. A while later, Frey met some girls in the shelter and helped them braid their hair. While she braided their hair, the mysterious girl from the forest walked into the room, and Frey tried to start up a conversation with her, but the girl ran away. One of the little girls around told Frey that the mystery girl's name was Elise and revealed that she was an extreme introvert who didn't talk or laugh with anyone. Frey asked about her parents, but the girl said they weren't in the area and implied that they may be dead. Meanwhile, Elise was in the garden admiring some flowers when Frey came by and embraced her while using her magic to try and make her feel better. Kaisel and the rest of the gang were already making plans to get out of Dodge when Frey arrived and begged them to stay for the night, so she could fulfill what she called a selfish desire of hers. Hendel was pleased to hear that they were staying over, and when Frey offered to play with the little ones, he agreed and said it was great since the parents around couldn't find time to play with them. Frey met up with the little ones in a room and suggested they make something called a wreath. The girls didn't know what it was, so she took them outside and made a circular weave of flowers which she said they could wear or hang on top of their doors. They asked her to teach them how to make it, so Frey sent them to get some flowers. Frey went to give Elise a personal lesson on making wreaths, but she ran off. Sometime later, Frey asked the girls to draw up some pictures, and when a girl tried to borrow one of Elise's crayons, she smacked her hand and ran off again when Frey tried to talk some sense into her. Kaysel was outside proving himself to be the ultimate wood-chopping machine, when he saw Elise staring at some yellow flowers. Frey came outside and asked Elise what was wrong before noticing that Elise was drawing the very flowers she was staring at. When Frey asked if she liked the flowers, Elise replied that her mom likes the flowers. And when Frey asked what happened to her mom, Elise said that demons unalived her mom before crying out loud while Frey embraced her. Some hours later, Frey and Elise used those yellow flowers to bake up some snacks which they served to everyone at the shelter, and they all loved it so much that they asked her to make more of it for them later. Afterwards, Frey watched proudly as she saw Elise playing around with the other girls at the shelter for the first time. That evening, Handel praised Frey for helping Elise open up, and then he asked her to stay over at their village. He said she could help mend the hearts of many people in that village if she stayed, and then asked her to think about it while Cleo, who was eavesdropping, lost her cool. That evening, Frey went to check on the girls and Cleo told Kaysel and Roy that the mayor tried to recruit Frey, and they all said Frey wouldn't abandon them because she was a precious companion of theirs. Meanwhile, Frey went to tuck Elise in, but Elise suddenly woke up and begged her to stay. The next day, Handel and the rest of the adults said their goodbyes to Kaysel's team, and afterwards, Elise took Frey into a barn room and locked her in from the outside. Frey tried to convince her to open the doors, but Elise said she wanted her to stay with them forever and ran away. Afterwards, Kaysel went to find Frey and he met Elise along the way. When he asked about Frey, she took him to the barn where she was locked, but on the outside they were suddenly attacked by a worm demon. Kaysel tried desperately to attack it, but the worm demon dodged all his strikes by hiding underground. Frey, who was watching the battle from the barn, heard another worm demon under the ground and tried to warn Kaysel, but he couldn't hear her. She then broke through the barn door and arrived just in time to save Elise from getting swallowed by a worm monster before Kaysel took it out. The second worm monster hid underground and Frey saw that Elise was feeling down, so she comforted her. When Frey looked in Elise's eyes, she remembered how she met Kaysel, and when the worm monster attacked again, Frey claimed they'd never lose to demons, and she pushed it back with a magic blast before Kaysel finished it off. Afterwards, they met up with the villagers and said their goodbyes to them after telling them about the demons, while Frey made a promise to Elise to return one day so they could make more snacks. On their way out of the village, Kaysel and the gang played around together and ate up a bunch of tasty cookies. Some days later, Kaysel and the team arrived at a town that was ravaged by demons, and Cleo immediately noticed that something wasn't right but pinned down exactly what the problem was. They spotted a person standing by in the area, and Kaysel went to talk to him thinking that he was a villager, but when he got close to him, the person suddenly tried to attack him. Roy stopped him before he could do any damage by playing a free kick with his head, and when Kaysel worriedly asked Roy why he just brutalized the man, Roy revealed that it was an undead. When the undead man got back up and tried attacking Kaysel again, Roy finished him off once and for all by decapitating him, and the gang soon noticed that they were surrounded by a horde of undead. They noticed a bright light twinkling in the nearby forest, and following Roy's orders, everyone immediately ran towards the light, except from Cleo, who covered them by creating a wall of fire between them and the undead. They met up with a man named Johan who was the one pointing the light at them, and he told them to be careful because the undead reacted to loud sounds and voices even indoors. Roy asked Johan why the undead were in that area, and Johan acted surprised by the word undead, so Roy shifted gears by asking how long the whole mess had been going on. Johan said the nightmare began when demons invaded their village, and during this attack, several villagers were unalived, but most of them managed to get away. However, a few of them, including Johan, didn't make it out, and they were all so afraid of the demons that they had themselves locked inside their homes. Before long, the demons left, taking the undead with them, but soon after, the villagers who they thought were dead came back, and Johan and the rest of the surviving villagers were glad to see them back, until they suddenly started attacking them, leaving Johan as the only survivor. Johan said that when the monsters attacked, he had boarded up the windows and gathered food, which was how he ended up surviving all by himself. During Johan's speech, Frey noticed some yellow flowers in the corner that were the exact same kind that Elise said her mom liked, causing her to say the name Elise. Immediately she said it. Johan asked her how she knew about his daughter and also asked if Elise was alive. Frey gleefully told her that she was not only alive, but taking shelter in a nearby village, and Johann heaved a sigh of relief before telling her that they got separated on the day of the attack. Cleo suggested they take him to see her, but he said he couldn't leave that place, and Kassel tried to debate his decision, but Roy told him to just let it go. When Johann asked what brought them to the village, Kassel revealed that they were trying to find their way to the Ogria mountain, so he suggested they spend the night at his place since it was too dangerous to head out at that moment. He also promised to take them to the path to the Ogria mountain the next morning, and Cleo was trying to argue against the idea of spending the night in a zombie-infested village, but Roy said it would be safer for them to move in the morning. In their room that night, Kassel asked what the undead were. So Roy explained that they were moving corpses, and Cleo added that there had been instances mentioned in the records of the Battle of Gallowplans 100 years ago where dead people rose up and started attacking the living, just like in the Walking Dead series. She also revealed that the undead were being controlled by demons and started feeling distraught over the fact that she didn't study the records from 100 years ago a bit more because of the sudden decision by Dominix to have her accompany Kassel. Kassel asked Roy how he knew so much about the undead, and Roy said he also looked it up once at the Tower of the Sage. Frey started to feel bad about the fact that the undead people surrounding the area were once humans, so Roy set her straight by telling her that there was no way to fix them since they were already dead. Cleo said they couldn't just leave the undead to be roaming around the area, causing Roy to ask if she intended to unalive all of them herself before reminding her that their main objective was to go after the Holy Sword. Later that night, Johann pulled out a blade, and when Kassel heard him walking around the house, he immediately got up to investigate. Kassel followed him to the basement of the building, where he saw Johann informing a tied-up undead he was keeping named Lisa that Elise was still alive. Johann talked to this raging monster as though she were a mistress of his and tried to feed her a loaf of bread, but she pushed it to the ground. Kassel couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed, but instead of interrupting Johann's madness, he chose to walk away instead. When Kassel got back to his room, he shared what he'd learnt with the team, and despite his attempts to be a Boy Scout and let the creepy geezer get away with keeping an undead, Roy suggested they questioned Johann. When Johann came out from the basement, they asked him about the undead in the basement, so he explained that Lisa was Elise's mom, and when she was unalived, he captured her corpse and kept her there. Then he acted paranoid as he suggested that Lisa was only sick and not dead, but Roy told him there was no way to bring her back. Johann said he couldn't leave Lisa, and Frey asked him about Elise, but he still suggested he had to be with Lisa. Kassel then gave him a pep talk about how family is important and encouraged him to reunite with Elise, so he asked for a moment alone with Lisa. He tried having a conversation with the zombie about Elise, but Lisa broke free from one of her arm restraints and scared him into soiling himself. The guys helped him tie her back up, and Roy told him he didn't have any choice but to put her to rest by impaling her neck, causing Johann to lose his mind. Just then, a horde of undead came by the house, and the team ran out to face them. Johann cried as he said the zombie wasn't Lisa since it didn't remember Elise, and he finally managed to slash its neck. Outside the house, Cleo blasted many of the undead monsters with flame magic before Kassel joined the fight and slashed a couple of them down while claiming he'd protect everyone. Back in Orvelia, the Black Edge elves returned to town after a successful demon raid, and Tam expressed how he enjoyed the hero treatment the people in town were now giving them. One of them said he couldn't trust them because they'd spent far too much time being scornful to their kind, and Tam replied that he felt grateful because the treatment they were currently receiving was far better than being bad-mouthed all the time. However, Rapine got a flashback of the day her mother was brutally unalived in front of her and Rahit, and this made her say that all of the people in Orvelia should just die. They got to the bread shop where Tam previously met the kind girl who helped him, and when he recognized it, he told his squad to move ahead without him before meeting the head baker and asking about the girl. The baker told him that she worked at a confectionery across the street, and when he asked if he wanted to visit her, Tam said yes. Meanwhile, Rahit met up with Claus, who asked him how the king's forest was, and Rahit said it was nothing out of the ordinary before revealing that he'd already submitted a report. Claus then thanked him for saving Kassel and Frey from the demons in the forest, and despite the fact that Rahit immediately recalled the battle he was referring to, he decided to be a nonchalant king by claiming he didn't remember them. At the same time, Scarlet was with her dad in his resting bed, and when she asked how he was doing, he said he was feeling better now that he'd seen her. However, Scarlet said she couldn't stay for long, and the king said he understood because Bale had already told him about the knights. He asked Scarlet if the Black Edge group were trustworthy, and she replied that they were because they were brought in by Lord Moraham himself, and also because their demon hunting results were nothing but exceptional so far. However, the king questioned the nature of Moraham's connection with the elves and said he was worried about Scarlet because she was similar to her mother in the sense that she didn't know how to doubt people. She told him to get well soon so that she could show everyone a healthy, majestic king again. And after she left the king's room, Demian noticed that Scarlet was pale and asked her to get some rest. But Scarlet said she couldn't because the day of Lee was approaching. Demia asked if the Dark Lord Angmund was really going to turn up, and Scarlet replied that she wasn't sure for now, but she knew the best course of action was to prepare for the worst. Scarlet then brought up how Demia had the chance to live a rich girl's lifestyle instead of joining the battlefield with her, and Demia reminded her of a day in their past when she asked Scarlet why she needed to take up the sword. To that, Scarlet replied that it was the duty of the royal family to protect the nation and not to dance around in stupid rich people's parties. Demia said the determined look in Scarlet's eyes back, then made her decide to become Scarlet's shield from that point on, and she promised to protect Scarlet before Rahit arrived at the scene. Demia commended him for the great work he'd been doing, and Scarlet told Demia to go ahead without her because she wanted to have a talk with Rahit. Meanwhile, the lover boy Tam hovered around the girl's shop like a restless bee until a bunch of kids stopped by and forced him into the shop to meet her. Back at the castle, Scarlet told Rahit that her father sacrificed himself to defend the people against all threats, and also that she intended to look after the people of the kingdom since the nobles only cared about themselves. After a bit of bonding, she asked why he fought demons for them, and he replied that destroying demons was all they could do. At the same time, Tam returned the girl's handkerchief and asked for her name, so she introduced herself as Sheila. He told her he'd recovered from his injuries and bragged about how he'd have smoked those attackers if he was serious. She offered to treat him to some homemade snacks, and he graciously accepted. The next day, Scarlet got the knights hyped up about the upcoming war on the day of Lee before asking for some opinions on how to stop the Dark Lord. Rahit suggested they investigate the Galua Plains where they believed the Dark Lord would respawn from, and Scarlet said they needed to go as a big group before deciding that the Black Edge would join the expedition. Sometime later, Sheila gave Tam some cakes, and they flirted for a bit before he ate them up and told her they were delicious. When Tam got back to the Black Edge hideout, he was brutally questioned about his meetings with Sheila by one of his comrades, but when Rahit came back and heard what happened, he said he trusted Tam and advised him to make the right move. Afterwards, Tam had a talk on the outside with Ripine and told her he appreciated being loved by the people as well as Sheila. When he asked her if she desired happiness beyond their revenge quest, Ripine narrated how her brother took care of her since the day their mother died, which made her decide to help her brother no matter what. She then asked if he could forgive the people of Orvelia because of his love for Sheila, and threatened to destroy him if he got in Rahit's way. The next day, Tam met up with Sheila and gave her some flowers for a cake before explaining to her that he hated his birthday because when he was young, Orvelian soldiers unalived his family on that day. Sheila then asked why he fought the demons for Orvelia, and Tam replied that he didn't do it for Orvelia, but rather because he intended to transform the world into a world without suffering, just like Thorfinn in Vinland Saga. On a mountain somewhere, Maria met up with Malduk, who told her that he'd waited 100 years to bring chaos to the world again, causing her to remind him that the Dark Lord Angmund was the one in charge of destroying the world, and he was just a sorcerer bringing him back. However, Malduk still relished in his madness, as he claimed that his only desire was to watch poor silly humans dance to their graves just like they did 100 years ago. He then remembered a time in the past when he was a sorcerer for the Republic of Grey who devoted himself to his research in an attempt to save their king who was dying at the hands of a disease. Back then, a knight named Theo told the princess, who was named Jane, that he was going to war soon and promised that he'd eventually return. Jane said she sometimes pondered over what life would be like if she hadn't been born as a royal, and their romantic moment was interrupted by Malduk, who accused Theo of seducing the princess. Theo said he intended to give up his life for the nation, and Malduk said it was a weak excuse because the war was already on the verge of starting. Theo brought up the fact that Malduk exerted too much influence in domestic affairs, and Malduk advised the princess to be wiser in selecting a romantic partner. When the king died, Jane wept relentlessly, and in an attempt to cheer her up, Malduk offered to bring the king back to life using forbidden magic, which he'd recently created during his research. After she agreed, he successfully used his powers of forbidden magic to bring the king back, but he came back as an undead, and Theo threatened to exile him for defiling the king. However, Malduk bragged about his accomplishment and called himself a god, but Theo wasn't having any of his wannabe Voldemort nonsense, so he forcefully exiled Malduk from the kingdom. After being exiled, Malduk felt bitter and desired to bring hell on Earth so the humans would experience real terror. Back in the present, Malduk yapped for several more minutes about his destructive goals, and Maria offered to help him bring the Dark Lord back, causing him to laugh maniacally for another hour or so. Elsewhere, Kaisel and the gang reached Orc territory, and Cleo talked about how weird the Orcs were for liking war. They overheard some battle screams in the area, and when they went to investigate, they ran into an Orc shaman named Kala, as well as his underling named Dale, fighting some undead Orcs. Kala destroyed some of the undead Orcs using magical blasts, but suddenly one of the undead appeared behind him and tried to attack. He blocked the enemy's attack by deploying a magic shield, and Dale took the undead out with a magical blast of his own. Dale asked Kala why he came there alone, but before he could reply, some of the undead Orcs started respawning. Seeing this, Kaisel immediately jumped in and saved Kala by chopping down a huge Orc zombie before Cleo used a rain of flames to destroy all the surrounding undead Orcs. After the battle, Kala thanked Kaisel and the gang for saving them, and when Dale tried to stop them from entering Orc lands even further, Kala told Dale that he'd been expecting them for 3 days now. He then asked for forgiveness on behalf of his hot-headed student and said a prayer to the ancestral spirits of the land before letting them in. Kala later explained to the team that he knew Kaisel was coming because he got word from ancestral spirits in his dream about how Kaisel would bring hope to the world in a future chaos. Kaisel then requested to see the Orc chief Ayatollah in order to undo the seal on the Holy Sword, but Kala said Ayatollah was already long dead, and added that the current chief named Sieg must have received instructions from Ayatollah concerning the matter. When Kaisel requested to meet Sieg, Dale said that Sieg forbade humans from entering their lands due to a past incident where a sorcerer turned their people into zombies. However, Kaisel still insisted on meeting Sieg, so Kala decided to take him to the chief and said that he'd fight to protect him if Sieg went crazy and attacked them. Dale tried to convince him otherwise, so Kala explained that he needed to help the heir of the Holy Sword as he was instructed in the dream. Kala then said that he could only go into their land with Kaisel, because if he went in with multiple humans, the Orc people could lose their mind, so the gang agreed to stay outside and wait. After Kaisel left with Dale and Kala, the team played around at the entrance until some other Orcs showed up and tried to attack them. Cleo and Frey talked them out of it, but then they saw that Cleo had drawn some trash on one of their sacred runes, so they got angry again. Meanwhile, Kala introduced Kaisel to Chief Sieg, and after Kaisel told them his goal, Sieg asked for Kaisel to defeat him as a way of proving himself as the rightful heir to the Holy Sword. However, Kala suggested that the heir must live and offered to fight in his place. Before their fight could start, Kaisel tried using some talk no jutsu to convince him otherwise, but Sieg responded by trying to crush him with his weapon. When he saw that Kaisel didn't flinch, he agreed to help Kaisel since he'd confirmed his heroic nature. Sieg then directed him to their holy shrine to retrieve something and told him that it was a brutal place that would test him. Just then, some Orcs arrived and introduced the rest of Kaisel's crew as a bunch of low-life criminals who defiled their fountain. Sieg then said they'd be held hostage, and stipulated that if Kaisel died at the holy shrine, they'd unalived his friends as well. Sometime later, Kala took Kaisel to the entrance of the holy shrine and revealed that only the chosen ones were permitted to go any further before revealing that the shrine was a sacred place used by shamans for training. He also told him to find a sacred altar deep inside the shrine where a test would be given to him before advising him to maintain a strong heart. Meanwhile, Cleo brought up the fact that the Orcs didn't take her staff, and Roy said it was because they saw them as cannon fodder that they could take down whenever they chose to. Cleo brought up how the place was peaceful now that all the commotion had died down, and Frey said she wondered if Orcs were peaceful people under normal circumstances. At the same time, Kaisel walked through a dark tunnel and eventually made it to the altar, but there he heard a voice that asked him who he was. The voice then asked him to show his heart, asking whether he had a weak heart or a strong heart. He eventually got overwhelmed by the voice, but just then, he heard a much calmer voice that called out to him. He suddenly got transported to a dark realm which had a door, and when he opened the door, he transformed into a much younger version of himself who had come home to meet his mother, Arlette. Arlette told him that dinner was ready, and as he feasted on his dinner, she suggested they go on a walk later, which he agreed. Meanwhile, the guard Orcs that captured Kaisel's teammates laughed about the idea of a weasel like Kaisel being the heir, and concluded that he'd die along with his friends. But Cleo opened her loud mouth again and told them that Kaisel was the true heir to the Holy Sword since he'd already broken a seal. Roy told her to cut it out, but she said she was determined to see them cry about it later. Frey said she was worried about the nature of the test, but Cleo said she'd love to give it a shot herself because it sounded interesting. Roy said she'd have a terrible time, and Cleo asked the guards what would happen if anyone other than the true heir entered the shrine. The guards gave her the silent treatment for a bit, and Cleo pestered them with even more dumb questions until they informed her and the gang that they were getting moved to a different location for being too annoying. Back at the holy shrine, Kaysel played around with his mom in a flower garden, and afterwards he smacked on some homemade sandwiches. He told Arlette that there was a lot he wanted to tell her about, and when she asked what it was, he realized that he'd forgotten everything he wished to tell her. Arlette said there was a lot of time for him to remember it, and Kaysel said it was a long time since he got to spend time with her like that. However, Arlette said they got to spend time like that every day, and he agreed, while Kala faithfully waited for him at the entrance of the shrine. The rest of the team were moved into a tent, and as they waited there, Frey expressed her concern for Kaysel, causing Roy to assure her that he'd be back. Back in the dream world, Kaysel started feeling sleepy after his playtime with Mama, and when he tried to fight off the sleep, he suddenly returned to the point where he reunited with Arlette for the first time. He tried to play things out like before, but he soon started to remember Arlette's death. Arlette tried to assure him that nothing was wrong, but he saw a much clearer memory of her death, and when he loudly told the spirit that his mother was dead, he transformed back into his adult form. The spirit resembling Arlette tried convincing him to stay in that happy memory with her where he didn't have any worries, but Kaysel claimed he needed to get the holy sword no matter what so he could save people who were in danger. Fake Arlette reminded him that he could never see her again if he left, but Kaysel said he didn't want to lose anyone again before leaving the room. When he woke up in the real world, Kaysel saw the spirit of Chief Iatola, who congratulated him on beating his illusions and revealed that he'd have been trapped in that illusion if he gave in to his desires. Iatola then wished him good luck in his future battles and gave him a special talisman, which he then picked up. Afterwards, Kaysel returned with Kala to meet Chief Seg, and when Kaysel gave Sieg the talisman, the chief used it to undo the Holy Sword's second seal. Cleo once again pestered Kaysel with questions about whether he could feel himself entering Ultra Instinct mode, but again he said he couldn't feel anything. However, Malduk, who was miles away, could feel his aura, and the Dark Wizard instantly realized it was the Holy Sword's power. Sieg advised Kaysel to remember his experience at the shrine and become a stranger warrior before promising to fight by his side when the time comes, the same way Iatola did for King Kyle. Sieg's parting words were interrupted when Malduk appeared and asked for the Holy Sword. Malduk then introduced himself as the one who created the undead orcs that attacked their land, and when Sieg tried to attack him, he stopped the chief in his tracks with a massive dark blast. When Sieg got back up, Malduk finished him off with another dark blast, causing Kaysel and the gang to charge at him at once. Malduk easily dodged the others' attacks, but when he crossed weapons with Kaysel, he felt the power of the Holy Sword. After minutes of brawling, Kaysel managed to cut off a few strands of Malduk's hair, and this ticked off Malduk so much that he fired a huge dark blast that took out Frey. Malduk started gloating like a maniacal idiot again, and Kaysel angrily started attacking him relentlessly, but he dodged all Kaysel's strikes. Kaysel dodged his blasts as well and soon had him cornered. Suddenly, Kaysel started glowing, and after noticing the power surge from the young hero's body, Malduk escaped into a dark portal. Kaysel's massive attack caused an explosion that destroyed the surrounding land and took himself out in the process. Which of the girls in the series would you love to attack with your holy sword? Frey, Cleo, or maybe Maria? Let us know in the comments. That's all for today's video. If you like anime recaps like this, check out this video here.